Good morning, Linda. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited that you are part of our Show Up and Lead series. And this is an opportunity where we get to learn about leadership from you and your experience. So I'm going to hand over to you for you to introduce yourself and your experience to our audience.
Thank you, Nancy, and happy 2026. Definitely a huge year of change, and I just know it's going to be a great one. Such a pleasure to be with you here today. And where do I start? Well, I guess I start with, the first concept for me around leadership is that it's totally a journey of experimentation. And it started all the way back with, when I started to think, what do I do after school? And I ended up doing an economics degree. And I think the world should be grateful that I didn't become an economist. Because really numbers weren't my thing as it turned out. But what I stumbled into along the way was people and organisational psychology, and that lit me up. And one of the things I've learned along the way is when you get that sense of that light, that glow, as it turns out, follow that. So I did. So I ended up finishing my economics degree, which is a good thing to do. But then I moved into industrial relations. And it all kind of started from there. So I spent most of my career in the human resources space. So I never actually studied HR. Sorry. Not sorry. But ended up in the resources sector and again had that same feeling of this is where I want to be. And I've been so fortunate to be able to carve out a career in the resources sector working for very big international businesses, but in the people space because that's what excites me. Being able to bring together people, systems, structures, goals, the complexity of that, I've loved. So I did that for too many years and loved it. But then I got to a bit of a crossroads in 2022 and began to really listen. And this is the other lesson that I've had in leadership. When you're ready for a transition, suddenly you feel a little out of alignment. And that shows up for me in various ways. Bit of discomfort in the body, certainly discomfort in the mind. Waking up at 3 a.m. going, everything's great, like life is good, I'm in a good job, I'm where I need to be, except maybe I'm not. And so I spent some time just letting come what was going to come next. And what was going to come next was something completely different, and I had never expected to be in a world where I'm running a wellbeing business, and it's called the Glow Circuit. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go along. But it wasn't something I was expecting to do, but it brought together so much of what I had learned as an executive and a leader, and that was really taking care of myself was super important. When I was younger, I could kind of just bash through days and nights and just keep working. But, as time progressed, I saw that my clarity, the capacity to make decisions and to really be there for others was totally dependent upon my physical and mental state. So that was a precursor to the Glow Circuit, and I began to play with that. And then I saw women in particular all around me trying to navigate through the vastness of the wellness space and work out what worked and what didn't. And long story short, here I am. I've founded a business. So I'm now kind of doing three things. I'm a non-executive director, which I love. I'm an executive mentor, and I'm the founder of a business, and I'm a mum, which is my most important role and the one I love the absolute most. But yes, that's me.
Wow, it's an amazing journey. Take me back to and I really like what you said about one day waking up, realising that, you had the greatest job in the world, but you sort of didn't. Take me more into that space. What was unfolding for you in that, and keeping in mind, you were a prominent leader in that space. Take us through that. What was that like for you?
It was exciting and challenging all at the same time, I have to say. I mean, I think the pivotal moments in my leadership journey have been moments of pause. You know, they've been moments where something has come along where I've had to reevaluate how my values are sitting against organisational values or just the broader context in which I'm operating. And those moments are never easy because you do have these crossroad points where you could continue on a path that you know really well and do a good job and have a nice life. Or you have these moments where you're invited into an adventure. And so, I mean, I'm a big believer in the hero's journey. I see the hero's journey play out in my life all the time. And so exactly like the hero's journey, I had a call. So my inner calling began to say, hey, there's this thing, and maybe here's even a name for it. And I ignored that for as long as possible because I was so like, I don't know anything about running a wellbeing club. I am not a yoga teacher. I am not a breathwork instructor. I just like this stuff. Like, who am I? But I couldn't ignore it because it was the 2 and 3 a.m. thing. It was like, no, it's not going anywhere. And one of the things that I did to explore it a little further was I created a little round table of people that I really trusted from different backgrounds. And I said, look, I've got this idea. I feel like it's got a place in the world. Can we just test this? I found that incredibly helpful. So that was a bit of the process, but it did take a couple of years. And I found that kind of stepping in and then stepping out and then thinking about, well, how do I transition well, really important. So it wasn't one day, here I am, and the next day I'm fully formed as something else.
Fantastic. Can you tell me more a bit about that circle? Because, you know, the people who surround us are really important. Where did those people come from? Not that we need to know names, but, you know, what can you tell us about the formation of the circle and the people in it?
No, thank you. They were all people that I had worked with closely in one form or another.
Okay.
And it was a little bit like an advisory board. So I consciously or unconsciously, you know, with that HR background, was probably thinking skills matrix as I was, and energy and excitement when I was asking people to be involved. So I brought together people that had experience in comms, in finance, who were absolute non-believers in the wellbeing sector as well, because I thought that was really important, and operational people. So people that I trusted, that I could listen to, and who were incredibly generous with their views and their time. Yeah, so it was a process of working with people that would challenge but also support.
Great. And what I also heard you say was that you didn't decide to leave one day to start the next. Can you tell us more about that? And that's leadership in essence. Can you tell us more about that journey? What did you do?
Yeah. Well, you know, over the time in my career, I've got quite good with transitions, because the first, I mean, obviously transitioning from a company to a different company is one of those. But the first really big transition for me was when I had my first child. And that was an amazing moment. I kind of hid it from my boss for as long as possible. I think he knew, you know, it was like 17 weeks by the time we had the conversation. But anyway, what I found then was really helpful was actually to set myself a 1-month goal, a 3-month goal, and then a 6-month goal. And, you know, with babies, you kind of just go with the flow in those goals. But I found that giving myself a sense of structure was incredibly important, because what I knew was that the structure that holds you in an organisation was not going to be there. That get to work on a Monday, finish on a Friday, you know, watch the emails, answer the phone calls, that was not going to be there. And, you know, that's quite a lot to put down. So having my own plan, setting up my own sense of financial stability as well. And I talk to people about that all the time in executive mentoring, because quite often the conversation does come back to transitioning. I always find getting stability first is really, really important, be it your financial situation, your health situation, and what you're going to do. Otherwise, the change is so discombobulating that the risk is, you don't grasp the potential that's standing there before you. So that was really important. I started to look at board roles before I left. So I had already gotten onto a couple of amazing not-for-profit boards, and that was a fantastic step into being a director. So I was lucky enough to join the board of Lifeline Australia. I'm still there today. So I found those types of transitions really helpful in establishing a board career that I loved. And I began to think about, well, how do I build a tapestry life? What do I love to do? And this sounds really clean now, and it's definitely not the case, because I kind of thought I might want to do lots of different things, but worked out over time actually I didn't want to. So I've narrowed it down over time into the 3 buckets of work that I feel kind of all lead to why I'm here in the world now, which is to help myself and others, find that energy, that purpose, and knowing that we have purpose. It sounds so simple, but actually it isn't all that easy to know that you're meant to be here in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you. So tell me more about the values that underlie that purpose.
Yeah, the values are, and they really haven't shifted over time. It's interesting when I think back to what was important to me, even as a kid, the values of being able to be creative, being able to look at situations in different ways have always stuck with me and have driven the types of career that I enjoy doing. So creativity has always been one. And also just a sense of really adding back to the world. It's such an important thing. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna way. I really mean that my sense of self-worth, my sense of what I'm here to be and do in the world has always involved giving back. And I've always had joy in being able to help other people where I can in the skill set that I have. So being of service is really important. Those are probably the really 2 big value sets. There's others, but I come back to those.
But they would underpin your leadership. So whether your leadership style was linked into the corporate space, you talked about resources, or into the wellbeing business that you've started, how do you bring people together in that leadership space? How do you grow and develop people despite the environment they're in?
It's an interesting one, because you still end up growing people even in board roles, I found. So maybe it's just the way I approach it. Once a people person, always a people person. But I find that you can grow people's capacity, even if they're a fellow director or the CEO, by asking good questions. And also understanding that leadership can be really quite isolating and lonely. And, checking in, just to check in. It's not there are times as a director where you've got to be quite inquisitive, and that's part of the role, and I definitely do that. But I think the other part is actually just knowing that sometimes being at those crossroads of many decisions with ambiguous results is not an easy place to be. And so having an ear and opening that door if somebody wants to just have that chat is a way that I develop leaders. And back in the corporate setting, I guess probably more from an executive perspective, it was really challenging people. We can all do much more than we think we can. I love that when I see it in the weights room, for example. A good strength instructor will say to you that your mind gives up before your muscles mechanically fail. And you know what? Sadly, they're so right.
I know.
They're so right. Every time I'm like, that is true. I'm just mentally fatigued. So I would put challenges in front of people, but support at the same time. I mean, again, so many examples, but I've got some lovely memories of sitting with people who were geniuses in technical spaces and the look of horror on their face when I would say, hey, do you want to lead a team? And they'd be like, oh, that is not what I do. And I'm like, not yet. So sometimes just kind of nudging people out into that call to adventure is definitely a role that you have to play as a leader, as a good leader, and provide the scaffolding and the safety net so that people don't feel they're being shoved over that cliff with a very hard landing. Yeah, so
I really
that's
love
what I like
that.
to do that.
And that is so true because that goes to the core of we all need a champion.
Yes.
And sometimes that champion can see things in us that we can't see for ourselves. And we just need that
100%.
stretch and they need to take us on that journey. So can you tell me more then in terms of where do you think leadership is going today for tomorrow? Because we've come from a dictatorial, autocratic style of leadership post-World War II. We've got interesting politics at the moment.
So interesting.
So where do you think leadership's going?
Well, let me just say, I think, first of all, the job of leaders has never been more complex. And I think you could say that in lots of different times in history. But I really believe that now because of the vastness of information and the rapid pace of change. Just dealing with that alone, the fact that you can be contacted all the time, and that's the expectation. And if you get out of that swim, you're so far behind, you can't afford to get out of that kind of technology and information flow as a leader. I think it's really complicated. So to me, the big next frontier, and if I add psychological safety into this as well, the big next frontier is leaders truly thinking about what have they got to do to show up, not just show up, but show up great every day and not accept that feeling tired, feeling burnt out, feeling that the family is going to be strangers to you, feeling that every day takes a little more than it gives. That's not acceptable. And I think it has been the mindset. It certainly was a mindset for me for a long time. So I think that leaders who genuinely step into this space and go, no, what do I really need to be doing? Physically, mentally, spiritually, I think that's another frontier. I think, not having any hesitation around the strength that having a spiritual practice, whatever that is for you, as a leader, keeps you centered and stable and compassionate in times of, great ambiguity and complexity. Those are all things that I think are opportunities for us as leaders to grow and to model to the generations who need a different style of leadership. I think about people of my son's generation. He's 18 now. They went through COVID. They went through life-changing situations in the world. Their use of technology is different. Their understanding of the world is different. The environmental factors are all different, so different to how I grew up. We have to lead differently, and that means we have to be the absolute best versions of ourselves to inspire and to motivate a generation who are going to inherit some pretty big, wicked problems for the world to solve. So that's where I think the opportunity is for all of us as leaders.
So in terms of your newfound business, how does that fit into the leadership that you talk about?
Well, look, it's essential. It's essential because, it goes to every aspect of our life. So the Glow Circuit is all about how do I find what energizes me across a number of domains. And there's so much in this that we've kind of unpacked it into 4 key things. So the first one is, how do I move strong? How do I actually increase my physical vitality and strength? We happen to do strength training and we do vinyasa yoga and we do mat Pilates. So all things that actually work with your body that don't necessarily rely on machines and other things. So you can take this movement with you wherever you go. So that's really one. But nutrition is important in there too. So we have a cafe because, and particularly for women and for myself, I've worked out that, so much of lack of energy is just pure underfueling. The advice that we've had over many years has been to undereat and to not pay attention to what you really need to do to get strong. So that's a really important one and a huge wake up for me and for many, many of us to kind of ignore that advice. The second one is around cortisol management. So you can be doing all the weights training and doing the strength and then feeling really freaked out and waking up at 2 a.m. and that stress in whatever aspect of your life can then make it really easy to drop all the habits that keep you well. So, choose a practice. We do breath and sound and meditation. Not everything works for everybody, but something. And then allowing recovery. That's the other big wake-up call. This sense of, we're a machine and you can just do the same thing every day. Well, it turns out you can't. So, you can, but then you burn out and that doesn't do anyone any good. So recovery is super important. So all of those things together, it's like having all the tools in one place that anyone, leaders, any person in their life as a leader can come find those tools in community, because that's the other missing piece, that supportive community. Here we are, we're all connected, and yet we're more isolated than ever before.
Yeah.
So that was part of the vision, and it's beautiful to see it come to life.
It's fantastic to hear too. So tell me more then, if this is where we're going, what do you think are the misconceptions of leadership today?
Well, one of the big misconceptions is that it's neat and it's tidy and you're going to get it right the first time. Not true. So not true. Oh, I wish it were. I can talk about that. But I think the second big misconception is that it's just about power. It's actually about service. It's so about service. And, it as a young leader, probably not going to be thinking that way unless you're particularly evolved. But it's just about really taking barriers out, really thinking about what is the purpose of my organisation or my role, who's going to be impacted by it, and how do I help everybody around me. That's the purpose. That's such an important part of it. So, it's hard when you look at some of the figures that are dominating the world stage right now. They are not about service necessarily. They are about power. But I think that that's a misconception of how leadership properly wielded can actually benefit the world. I think a service mindset is more important than ever.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've got this notion of, I always talk about transactional versus transformational and transcendental leadership. And to some degree, you need to understand that transactional piece, right?
Absolutely.
That ticking boxes, that, there's a place and space for that.
Essential.
But as we move into positions, we cannot forget people. Everything we do
100%.
is people. And I say that a lot. So I'm going to ask you, what advice do you have for someone who's stepping into that leadership space who's wanting to get out of that transactional ticker box, but wanting to grow and move people, what do you think they need to do for themselves and what do you think they need to do for others?
Well, I think the first thing to do for yourself is quite a bit of self-analysis. I don't mean on a couch, although that could be nice, and there's definitely a time and place for that. But a real question of when somebody asks you what's important, what is that? I tell you, I mean, I've interviewed thousands of people in recruitment, and one of the things that did astonish me was a number of people when you said, why do you want this job? And very often it was a leadership job. They couldn't really tell you other than it's the next step up the ladder. And so it's that kind of external success indicator. Hey, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I've been a beneficiary of that type of system and I'm grateful. But to really move into that transformational, transcendental space, that can't be your reason. Stepping into somebody else's hierarchy, somebody else's ladder, the satisfaction, the value that you personally derive from that erodes quickly over time. And it all comes back to the start of this conversation around how do we as leaders find ourselves not getting to that point where what we're giving isn't being matched by what we're getting. So that sense of, why, get clear on your why. And then if you need to do some work to get your physical, mental, emotional and spiritual selves into a learning pathway, I don't mean perfection. There's no perfection here. Leadership is messy. But get yourself into a pathway, surround yourself by good mentors, good networks, good education, whatever it is that you feel you need, do that. And remember that your success as a leader is the success of your team. I had a fabulous leader who just succinctly put it in a very Australian way, and that is that, if you're a leader and you're sitting there saying, oh, my team is la, 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 how about we put the mirror in front of the face and go, oh, that's my job.
Yeah.
And the next part to that is, as a leader, one of the hardest things that I've found personally and that I've seen others struggle with is when you've got the wrong person in the job. No one's bad, but people can be a poor fit for a bunch of reasons. Don't wait. Move compassionately, but move quicker than you probably think you should to rectify that situation. It is one of the most challenging things to go through, but it's essential because if you've genuinely got a great purpose and the purpose is to serve the world, then you need the right team. No one works on their own.
It's tricky, isn't it? And
so tricky.
Often people hold back because they don't want to be not liked. And so, can you give us an example where you had to deal with someone who wasn't necessarily a great fit? What were the specific steps that you took in that space to then honour their dignity too?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it is about dignity. It is. You don't. One of the evolutions that I've enjoyed watching in organisations has actually been the psychological safety piece, because the days of sacking somebody and then they have to kind of walk through the office and collect all of their stuff and do the walk of shame out, hopefully are done in most places. It does not have to be that way. So look, I've obviously been part of many people leaving organisations. And when I was in that situation, so I'll talk about the executive, then I'll talk about my personal experience as well in my own business, because it doesn't get easier. But as an executive, as the head of people, I would often be with people who had just been given the equivalent of a lightning bolt, that the world was going to change, that it wasn't necessarily something that they wanted. And what I worked out over time was that being a steady, calm, stabilising presence, not trying to overwhelm with information, was super important. So understanding that someone's life shifting overnight is going to take time to integrate, and you simply being there to support and to guide and to provide information when they're ready for it. So not let me sit you down and take you through the letter and all of the stuff. There'll be a time when questions are going to be asked. I also learned over time to not try and do all of that myself, because it's actually an incredibly emotionally draining situation to be. And I've really valued, having a team, a small team, using chaplaincy at times to provide emotional regulation so that I didn't have to play that role as well. So that was really important. In my own personal business, it's actually harder. It's easier to kind of put your logical, rational mind in when you're an HR executive, I've found, to help people leave really well. In my own business, I had to walk through this sense of I've stuffed up. I've employed the wrong person. I've not supported them. And look, they're good questions to ask. And I think if I hadn't asked myself all of those questions, then I wouldn't be on the right track. So I took some time to actually work through all of that. But at the end of the day, what I realised was I had chosen people that couldn't match my energy. And it was unfair to them and unfair to me to continue. So, look, in some cases people just self-select because it becomes quite apparent that the mismatch in energy, the mismatch in speed of execution, in particular in a new business, a startup, is chaotic. You've got to want and enjoy that kind of pace. So sometimes people just self-select. But sometimes you do have to nudge, and it's about being gentle, and it's about being clear about this is not an end of a relationship unless you choose for that to be the case. But we have to move forward, and that's it.
So as you're going through that, you do a lot of work, I'm going to say body, spirit and soul.
Yes.
And it's never easy.
Never.
What's the message that goes through your head as, in that leadership space as you are communicating these sentiments to these individuals?
Look, it's, first of all, I've learnt to trust. It's still not easy. When I say trust that things happen when they need to, it's still a conscious effort to have that trust and to have that faith when you can't see what the outcome is going to be. But I do trust people's resilience. I do trust that if one door closes, I've seen time and time again people walk into different paths. Sometimes they're about to head into maybe years long of experimentation, and that might be painful for them. Other times it's the best thing that ever happened, and you meet someone who 2 months before was bereft of an opportunity but has suddenly found themselves where they need to be. But that is not my responsibility. My responsibility, and I've learnt that the hard way, I can't take accountability for what happens after we've had the compassionate conversation about change needing to happen. That's where you need to be met, and that's where you need to hold faith and have the door open if the person chooses to re-engage with you. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. It's lovely when maybe even years down the track people reach out and say, I didn't like it at the time, but thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tell me more about the metrics aligned with your own. I often talk about how do you turn up and how do other people see you turn up. And you've mentioned a plethora of strategies that you use, and they are mind, body and soul. So what are the metrics that you use for yourself? What are the metrics that you use in supporting the growth of others?
It's a great question. I've never really thought about it in terms of metrics per se. I mean, I know when I listen to when I'm actually getting ideas. That's one of the key internal metrics. So I know that I'm doing my job as a leader and sparking a creative environment, which is one of the things that I'm here to do. When I step out of detail for long enough to actually hear, because I hear a lot of innovations, I get the intuitions. When that's not happening, not good. That's when I've stepped back into anxiety and fear and all of the other shadow sides that are always there. So I guess that's a metric when I'm getting great ideas and when I'm able to be joyful when sometimes ideas don't work. Sometimes people bring you things that, you know, you need to experiment with and they're passionate about, and you give it a go and it doesn't necessarily work, and you can still be okay with that. And that's essential as a leader. It's so essential. How you show up when things are going great, that's easy. How you show up when something has just fallen flat, when you're not getting the results that you think you need, or when something bad has happened, that's the true sign of leadership. So I hold myself to account in those moments.
I'm so glad you said that. I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and it's what I've written in my third book. The essence of leadership really turns up when you're not in your best moment. How is it that you are still dealing with situations that honour your own dignity and the dignity of others, but also holds people in a space that they know that that's not a great time for you, but they also feel secure that they can still approach you, they can still have that conversation with you because they know that you know yourself so well that you would never impact negatively on them.
Had this just the other day. Just the other day. I mean, of course. So I have a fantastic new manager at the Glow Circuit. She started a couple of months ago. Just absolutely love her energy. And we have a new marketing person. So we're still finding our rhythm as a team. And so without all of the detail, there was a little bit of, you know, we all thought there was clarity on outcomes and goals and when certain ads were going to go out, and there was some confusion about this. And so we're sitting there in the afternoon, and the manager and I were both quite exasperated, to be fair, about the fact that we thought the plan was crystal clear, but maybe it wasn't. And then on top of that, we had a very cranky interaction with a member who was not happy about something. And so it was like this layering of, you know, you think you're on top of everything and then you get tested, which is quite often the case. Every time you think you're good, bang, let's just see how you go under a bit of pressure. So, look, it was a difficult afternoon because we had to kind of really get very clear with our marketing person. You've got everything. You wanted all of this in detail with dates, and we gave it to you, and yet we're nowhere near being able to do this. So it's about holding to account and not accepting the deadlines are going to shift. No, they're not. They're going to stay as they are, because the second you take your foot off that pedal, everything's a negotiation. And actually lots of things are, but some things cannot be. So that was interesting for both of us, and it was a case of saying, what can we learn? Are we sending too many things? Are the messages mixed? Let's have that conversation. So we had a difficult afternoon and it felt heavy. And I said to my manager, who I trust and love, I feel terrible this afternoon. You know, I started today, I was excited. I've ended up feeling like, oh, why have I done this? You know, it's heavy. And then I was driving home and I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? These are one of those moments where you can step into your leadership and not wash away any of the fact that it was heavy and it was not where we needed to be. But I just sent her a text and I said, you know what? This afternoon was bumpy, but we're going to win this game. And she wrote back and said, thank you for saying that.
Good on her.
There it is, you know, like, yes, it's going to be bumpy and we have a path forward. And guess what? The next morning, ads are up, we're looking good, we're happy. So I think I've learned over the years, don't ignore those situations. Don't go silent. Name them and express confidence that we can get through this together. And that's building trust. That is gold.
Oh, that is perfect. That's just amazing. I'm going to throw some leadership things at you.
Okay, let's go.
And see what you think.
Yeah.
So, what are 3 non-negotiables of a quality leader?
Well, the first one is ethics. You have to be able to be trusted, particularly in today's world, but always. You know, do what you say you're going to do and come from a place of wanting the greater good. I think that's essential. The second one is maybe a little controversial because I think leaders quite often end up leading people outside their technical capacity. And I think you can do a good job of that. But you've got to actually be very competent. You know, I mean, how dare you sort of suggest that you can lead others if you're not really good at 1 or 2 technical things and be a good communicator and know what motivates people. So I think competence is an absolute non-negotiable. And the third one is to really understand that we're all human beings here together and that people matter more than results, always. People always matter more than results and process. And never, ever forget that.
What's, if you feel comfortable, who was one outstanding leader that you had the privilege of knowing and working, maybe working or just knowing?
Sure. So one of the great, I mean, there's lots, but one of the great leaders for men is still a dear friend of mine, is actually Nev Power, who was the CEO of Fortescue Metals. And, you know, Nev led at the front. So he taught me about leadership visibility. You know, this was a person who was very busy across a number of fronts, but got out into the field and engaged and did not shy away from the difficult conversations that you need to have at times. I mean, resources it's a cycle, right? It was not a bed of roses. There were many times when we were restructuring organisations and doing things that were going to change people's lives, and that was not easy. He never shied away from that. And that taught me a lot. And the second part to it was that he trusted the team to make the changes. So there was a point at which, it was around 2014, the iron ore price dropped significantly. And if we had not made a lot of structural change to lower costs, you know, there were big question marks around not just that particular business, but all of the businesses actually in the iron ore industry. He could have gone out and got a consulting firm, and there's no shame in that, right? There are times and places to bring in that support. He could have done that. But he'd seen over his career that actually doing a consulting exercise that was on top of an organisation eroded its muscle. And so that's what he chose not to do. He actually chose to entrust the organisation to share as much as we could the fact that there were costs that needed to come out and needed to change, and gained ideas and then executed. And the desire of people to actually get the organisation back on track was astonishing. So, yeah, I think he's been incredibly inspirational. And there's just too many others to kind of mention, but those were a couple of really big learnings.
Okay. 2 more questions for you. So I want you to think back to the Linda who started out in her first leadership role. And I'd like you, the evolved Linda, to share something with that younger Linda.
Yes, much younger.
Younger Linda. When she first started out in her first role, what would be the advice that you would give to her? What would be the message you would give her about leadership?
Probably 2 things. Well, no, definitely 2 things. One is don't try and do it all on your own. So I think for me, it was a big leap from going from an independent sort of contributor to suddenly having a team. And initially not understanding that actually the work was now about the team having absolute clarity and buy-in to what we needed to actually do. So much more time with people and helping them understand the vision and their roles. It did really surprise me as a younger leader how much time was needed to get clarity and to not be frustrated when people didn't get it straight away. You know, as an independent contributor, you could go from here to there very quickly because you know where you're going, but the challenge of bringing a whole bunch of people along with you took way more than I expected. So that was definitely one. And the other one was just because you're not hearing bad news doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's there, baby. Go looking. It's a flag. If one of your team hasn't come along and said, oops, we've just had this major stuff up at least once a week, then you're not being told what's really going on.
Wow. Okay, so leadership today, what needs to change for tomorrow?
Well, not accepting that leadership comes at such a big cost personally. You know, there's a lot of benefit. Don't get me wrong. I think leadership is an absolute privilege, and that's a mindset. It is a privilege. And service is what you need to do to earn that privilege. And at the same time, not accepting that there's all these other elements of life that are just going to fall away. You know, the number of people, including myself to a degree, who have found themselves at the end of an executive career, and maybe you've got your family and hopefully you've got some physical health and, you know, you've got other interests going on, but who've actually sort of worked out that I'm not really necessarily connected to a whole bunch of people that bring me joy in my life, or I don't even know what I like doing anymore. I think that's a huge cost. And so I think having that shift would bring stability, would bring the capacity to create psychologically safe places of work, because if we're doing that for ourselves as leaders, then we're going to expect our teams to also have a really well-rounded life. And I don't see that as negotiating away high performance. Absolutely not. I see that as a lever for high performance. So this is not some kind of nirvana where we all work for 5 minutes and then we have a jolly time. No, getting things done together takes effort. But I think the opportunity cost of leadership needs to be something that we work on, and we come out truly better as people by the end of whatever leadership journey we're on.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.